Welcome to Craving the Heat, where desire takes the lead and every story leaves you wanting more. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest naughty stories. I never expected a single sentence so innocently spoken to crack open the shell I had so carefully built around my secret life. But on my son Jacob's 10th birthday, he asked for something that shattered everything I thought I had under. We were in the living room, balloons clinging to the ceiling, the scent of chocolate cake still heavy in the air. My husband, Mark, had just stepped outside to take a work call, his usual way of being present without truly being there. Jacob had finished opening his presents and was fidgeting with the ribbon of one of the boxes, his eyes unusually serious. For a boy his age, "Mom," he said, looking up at me, "can I make a real wish now, not like for toys or games, but a real one?" I smiled, brushing his messy hair away from his forehead. "Of course, baby. What's your real wish?" His little fingers twisted the ribbon tighter. His voice dropped to a whisper. "I wish Mr. Andrew lived with us." My heart stopped at Mr. Andrew, my husband's best friend, our neighbor, the man who helped coach Jacob's baseball team, the man I had been secretly seeing for over a year. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my expression from changing, but my mind was racing. "Why do you say that, honey?" Jacob shrugged. "He's always nice. He plays catch with me when Dad's busy. And you smile more when he's around. A lot more." I could barely breathe. Mark walked back in just then, smiling at Jacob and ruffling his hair, oblivious to the emotional earthquake that had just begun. I excused myself and walked to the kitchen, my hands trembling as I clutched the counter dot. It started so innocently. Mark had always been ambitious, driven, and dependable. But dependable eventually became predictable, and predictable eventually became distant. Our marriage had flattened into routine, empty conversations, late nights, short kisses that barely brushed skin. Andrew was the opposite. Charming, funny, unexpectedly intuitive. He had gone through a divorce of his own, and perhaps that was why he could see right through my loneliness. It was never meant to go anywhere. It started with coffee, then confessions, and then touches we never should have allowed. The first time it happened, I cried in the shower for hours. But guilt has a strange way of softening over time. What once felt wrong began to feel inevitable. Andrew never pushed for more. He never asked me to leave Mark, but he showed me something I'd forgotten: how to feel desire, attention, even laughter. And Jacob, well, Jacob adored him. He would light up every time Andrew walked in. I didn't realize how much it meant to him. I didn't realize how much he had noticed. That night, after the guests left and Jacob went to bed, I sat alone on the porch with a glass of wine, watching the sky shift between bruised blue and deep purple. Andrew texted me, "Did Jacob like the drone?" I saw his face when he unwrapped it. I think I've been officially replaced. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I stared at the stars and thought of Jacob's wish. He didn't know what he was really asking for, but he did feel the absence, the gaps, the emotional tension that lived in our home like a ghost. The next day, I told Andrew we needed to stop. He didn't fight me. He looked heartbroken but calm, like he had always known this day would come. "You're a mother first," he said gently. "You're doing what you need to do." But I didn't do it because I was noble. I did it because the lie had reached my child. And that was a line I never wanted to cross. 2 weeks later, I told Mark everything, not out of courage, but because I could no longer look at Jacob and pretend. I expected yelling, broken plates, threats. What I didn't expect was silence. Mark didn't say a word for what felt like hours. Then he stood, walked into his home office, and shut the door. He barely spoke to me for days. When he did, it was cold, clipped, mechanical. But we stayed under the same roof for Jacob, or at least that's what we told ourselves. The worst part, Jacob knew something was wrong. Kids always do. He stopped asking when Andrew was coming by. He stopped smiling as much. One night, I tucked him in and kissed his forehead. As I turned off the light, his small voice broke the silence. "Did I wish wrong?" I turned, startled. What do you mean, sweetheart? He looked down at his hands. Because I wished something that made you sad. I didn't mean to. I sat beside him, fighting tears. No, baby, you didn't wish wrong. You wished from your heart, and that's never wrong. He nodded and whispered, I just wanted everyone to be happy again. Time didn't fix everything, but it did force change. Mark, and I tried therapy. Some days are better than others. Trust, once shattered, doesn't heal like a scrape. It heals like a bone, uneven and slow. Andrew moved away a few months later. He never said goodbye to Jacob. Maybe he knew it would hurt too much. Years passed. Jacob grew up, and our family settled into a new kind of normal, flawed, fragile, but honest. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I still hear Jacob's voice in my memory. I wish Mr. Andrew lived with us. It was a wish that exposed the cracks in everything we tried to keep together. A wish I'll never forget. And though I cannot erase what happened, I can say this much. I learned the difference between what we long for and what we owe to those we love. The confession didn't break us in the dramatic, cinematic way I'd always feared. It broke us. In silence. The kind of silence that echoes louder than screaming, that stains even the mundane moments. Breakfasts became rituals of avoidance. Dinners were conducted under a veil of tension so thick I could barely taste the food. Mark no longer kissed me goodbye in the mornings. He still made Jacob's lunch, still paid the bills, still slept on the same side of the bed, but it was like living with a ghost who used to know you and Jacob sweet. Observant Jacob became quieter too. He didn't mention Mr. Andrew again. He never asked why he stopped coming over, never brought up the drone, or the afternoons spent playing catch. But I could see it in his eyes when he looked at me, a growing awareness that the world he thought he lived in had shifted. Children don't need all the details to know when something's broken. They just feel it. 3 weeks after the confession, I found myself alone in the laundry room late at night, folding socks with trembling hands. Mark came in, his eyes tired, his shirt still tucked in. He leaned against the dryer without speaking. After a long moment, he said, Was it love? It was the question I had dreaded most. I don't know, I whispered. I don't think it started that way. I think I just needed to feel like someone saw me, like I wasn't invisible anymore. He nodded slowly. His voice was low, hollow. And I didn't make you feel that way. I wanted to argue, to tell him it wasn't all his fault, but part of me knew that would only sound like justification. We both stopped trying a long time ago. I just admitted it in a louder, uglier way. He turned to leave, but paused at the door. Jacob is what matters now. I'm not ready to forgive, but I won't take him away from you. It was the coldest mercy I'd ever received. Months passed. Therapy became a weekly ritual, sometimes separate, sometimes together. There were tears. There was yelling. There were breakthroughs and setbacks. And through it all, we tried for Jacob. If not for ourselves. But the thing about infidelity is that it doesn't just damage the person who is betrayed. It infects the whole ecosystem. It made me second-guess every choice, every smile Jacob gave me. Was he pretending now too? Was he starting to resent me? Would he one day come to hate me the way I hated myself? One afternoon while doing dishes, Jacob walked in with a drawing, crayon and marker on construction paper. This is us, he said proudly. It was a picture of the three of us, me, Mark, and Jacob holding hands. Our smiles were lopsided. His stick figure limbs too long, but in the center, a sun shined down, and under it, Jacob had written in crooked letters, Family. I held it like it was a lifeline. Eventually, I started writing again. I'd always been a part-time freelance editor, but I never gave myself space to create. Now, in the quiet, painful stretches of time when Mark and I didn't speak, I wrote. In journals, short stories, poems I'd never show anyone. Writing became my therapy when the couch felt too hard, too exposed. Mark, too, changed. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but slowly. He started joining Jacob and me for movie night again. He didn't pull away when our hands brushed in the kitchen. One night, he stayed at the dinner table long after Jacob had gone to bed. "I miss us," he said simply. "I miss who we were before the silence," I replied. He nodded. "Maybe we can find something new. Not what we had, but something honest." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a beginning. And yet, not everything healed. The void Andrew left was real. Not because I wanted him back. I didn't, but because he had been a mirror, a reflection of what I needed to rediscover in myself. And Jacob, he still spoke less, observed more. He had matured in a way no 10-year-old should have to. I saw it in his drawings, in the books he chose, in how tightly he clung to both me and Mark at night. One day, while driving into school, he asked quietly, "Do wishes ever hurt people?" My hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Sometimes," I said honestly, "but wishes come from hope. And hope can't be bad, even if the results are messy." He nodded slowly. "I think I won't wish for people anymore. Just for things. Safer that way." It broke my heart. Because that was the cost, not the lost affair, not the tension in my marriage, but the part of my son that now believed hope could hurt. Jacob turned 12 in early spring. His smile was wider again. He had friends, games, and started writing little stories of his own. Mark and I weren't the same, but maybe that was okay. We had become something rawer, more vulnerable, and strangely, more connected. That night, after the cake was eaten and the guests had gone, I tucked Jacob in and kissed his cheek. He looked up and smiled, then whispered, "This year, I wished for something simple." "Oh," I asked, "what was it?" "That we stay like this, real, even if it's not perfect." Tears welled up before I could stop them. "That's the best kind of wish," I whispered. "Some scars don't fade, but sometimes we learn to live around them." That second birthday after the confession was quieter. We invited fewer people. No balloons. Just pizza, a few close friends from school, and a small bonfire in the backyard. Jacob didn't mention Mr. Andrew. He hadn't for over a year. And yet his presence lingered, not as a name, but as a ghost of something Jacob once wanted, something he hadn't fully understood. I noticed it in the way Jacob studied me when I laughed. It was almost as if he was always trying to measure the authenticity of my happiness, trying to see if the cracks were still there. The truth was, they were .Mark and I had reached a new kind of rhythm. Some nights he stayed up late reading. Other nights he'd sit beside me on the couch, our legs brushing beneath the blanket like strangers learning each other all over again. He had softened in ways I never expected, asking more questions, listening more than he ever used to. And me? I learned to stop hiding. That didn't mean the guilt was gone. But I'd stopped apologizing for breathing. I had stopped shrinking around my own son. I had stopped pretending the story of our lives would ever return to the way it was before the wish. One evening in early summer, Jacob had fallen asleep in my lap after watching a movie. The TV hummed quietly in the background, the room dim with only the soft amber glow of the lamp in the corner. Mark sat across from me, nursing a cup of coffee. He watched Jacob's chest rise and fall and said quietly, "He's stronger than both of us." I nodded. He had to be. We forced him to grow up too fast. Mark's eyes didn't leave Jacob. You know what hurts the most? Not that you cheated, but that he noticed the gaps before I did. I didn't speak. There was nothing I could say to that. But after a pause, Mark added, "And the worst part is, I can't even blame you fully. I stopped being your husband long before you stopped being my wife." That night, for the first time in nearly 2 years, he reached for my hand, not as a symbol, not as a duty, but as a man who was trying. And I let him. Weeks passed, and one day Jacob brought home a school assignment. A personal essay titled, "The Wish That Changed My Life." I braced myself as I read it in private later that night. When I was 10, I made a wish for my birthday. It wasn't for a toy or game. I wished that someone would stay forever, but he didn't. And my mom cried a lot after that. My dad got quiet. I didn't understand then, but now I think maybe Grown-ups break too. I don't think my wish was wrong. I think wishes show us what we're missing. And after that wish, we all started talking more, even if it hurt. So yeah, I think my wish worked. Just not the way I thought it would. I cried alone that night. Not out of shame, but something far more complicated. Because my son had not only seen the truth, but had somehow made peace with it long before I had. A year later, Mark and I renewed our vows in a quiet ceremony. No guests, no fanfare. Just the three of us on the beach at sunset. Jacob held the rings. He was 13 by then, taller, with a voice just starting to change. When we asked him to say something, if he wanted, he hesitated, then nodded. I used to think love meant people never messed up, he said. But now I know it means saying sorry even when it's hard, and trying again, even if you're scared. His words struck something deep in both of us. And in that moment, under the dying light of the sun, with sand clinging to our shoes and the sound of waves soft in the background, I realized Jacob's birthday wish never really failed. It just grew roots in broken soil. I still think about Andrew sometimes, not with longing, but with understanding. He came into my life when I was drowning. But I learned to breathe again without him. The real miracle wasn't that Mark forgave me. It was that our son never stopped believing we could find our way back even when we didn't. That's the part one never expected. That the deepest love would come not from the man I betrayed, or the one I strayed toward, but from the little boy who saw us at our weakest and still chose hope. Some truths take years to bloom. Some forgiveness takes a lifetime. Jacob was 17, now not taller than me, broader than Mark, with the same deep eyes he had as a boy, but with something else behind them now, something harder to define. He'd become thoughtful, quiet, brilliant with words, but slow to speak. Not cold, but observant. Like someone who had learned young that people were fragile. We were at dinner one night, just the three of us. Mark had grilled steaks. Jacob had just received early acceptance to NYU's journalism program. The table buzzed with a kind of peace. That used to feel impossible, and then, out of nowhere, he said, I remember everything from that birthday. I looked up, my fork frozen midair. Mark set his glass down slowly. Jacob continued, his voice calm, steady to steady. I knew something was off. I didn't understand it then. But I do now. I opened my mouth to speak, but Jacob shook his head gently. You don't have to explain, Mom. I'm not angry. Not anymore. His eyes flicked to Mark. And Dad, I know you knew more than you said. You held us together even when you were broken. Mark looked down at his hands. Jacob leaned back in his chair, his voice softer now. I think that wish I made, it didn't bring Andrew into our lives. It revealed everything we were pretending wasn't there. I thought I just wanted someone else around. But what I really wanted was honesty. I felt the tears sting my eyes. And we got there, he said. Eventually, not perfectly, but we did. The silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was sacred. That night, after Jacob went to bed, I stood in the hallway and looked into his room. Posters on the wall. Books stacked beside the bed. A laptop with half-written essays and story drafts left open. He wasn't a child anymore. And yet, I saw in his sleeping face the boy who once wished for someone else to live with us. A wish born from a child's. Intuition misplaced, misunderstood, but pure. Mark came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. His voice was warm against my ear. We didn't lose him. I nodded slowly. No, he saved us. We dropped Jacob off at college on a windy September afternoon. I cried in the car quietly as Mark drove us home. But they were not tears of guilt anymore, not of shame. They were tears of a mother who had weathered a storm and found something still intact at the end. Love, not perfect love, but real. Months later, I received a link to Jacob's first published article in the student paper. The title? The Birthday Wish That Changed My Family. He never used our names, never gave details, but I recognized the story in every line. And in the final paragraph, he wrote, I used to think love meant being flawless, but I've learned it means choosing someone over and over even after the breaking. That's the wish I carry with me now. Not to bring someone into my life, but to keep choosing the ones who stayed. I closed my laptop and cried. Not because I was sad, but because the story had finally come full circle. And in that moment, I knew his wish had come true. Just not in the way any of us expected.